information, I guess. This is known as a boat rod or a casting rod or a downrigger rod. Okay. The irony is that most people use a downrigger out here on the west coast of BC with downriggers. They use a mooching rod with a mooching reel. But still, there's a good 50% of the guys who like to catch at least half their salmon on a multiplier reel. Okay. Multiplier because as you turn the crank once, the arbor, this section here that is retrieving the line, is turning at 3 or more times. I think the ratio for this one is about 3.8. So every rotation here is 3.8 turns of the arbor here, meaning for each rotation done by the angler when he's retrieving a fish, he brings the fish that much faster in. Not considered as sporting as a mooching reel, which is 1-to-1. The key thing, first off, on this kind of reel is it sits on top of the rod. Okay, be completely impossible to use like that. Okay. It's designed for a right-hand retrieve. In these cases, if you're left-hand, you buy one with a left-hand retrieve. Most other reels can be switched back and forth, not with an old-style multiplier. To set this up to use, after its line has been mounted on, well, let's go through components first, actually. Okay, so spool, arbor, spool tension knob. Okay, that's key. Spool tension knob. Clicker. That's irrelevant right now. See if your clicker even works. I heard. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. Okay. Clicker on. Come on. Clicker on. And clicker on when a fish is pulling. That's what it sounds like. Clicker off for other demonstration. We'll come back to clicker afterwards. Crank, obviously. Main drag knob, known as the star drag. Okay, and free spool control. So, using those terms and terminology, you want to set up this rod for proper fishing. Sir, just remind me, are you trying to cast off the shore, or are you using it on a downrigger?
Well, I'd be using it in my kayak jigging.
Jigging, okay.
And the option of casting from shore.
Yeah. Wouldn't start casting until you develop a lot of confidence with this, as you've already discovered. Okay. Jigging is your easiest setup to begin with. So, after you've got line on here and it's strung through the guides of the rod, and you have added your choice lure, let's say your buzz bomb, whatever it is. That buzz bomb is of a certain density, certain weight. Okay. You need to adjust your bait caster, another name for these reels, or you need to adjust your reel for that bait of the day, for that lure of the day, or every time you change it for the different mass. So the easiest way to do that at first is have your free spool off. Otherwise this is known as free spool control or anti-reverse control, depending on whether you're talking about putting it into free spool or putting it into anti-reverse position. Either or, without getting too complicated. For a beginner, start with this, with the anti-reverse engaged. You know that's engaged right away because in this reel the lever is backwards and you turn this crank and look, the spool moves. When the free spool, you turn the crank, spool doesn't move. Okay, that's what differentiates those two right off the bat. As a beginner, start with it in this position. Pull out what line you need. If you have trouble pulling out line, just put it on free spool for a moment. Okay, and attach your lure. Now here's the key for your day's successful fishing. You have your lure hanging a few inches off the tip of the rod. Put your finger, your thumb, on the top of the spooled line. Move with your other hand your lever to the free spool position. Now, if you were to remove your thumb, the line is going to begin to spool out. Okay, unwind. Okay, a bit of imagination here. That's what you want. You're now adjusting your spool tension for that lure. Hold the line horizontal like this, along the kayak, on the shore before you go fishing, or anytime you change the lure, on the deck of the boat. Just hold it horizontal, release it. Okay? so that your lure doesn't fall into the water, falls onto something solid. And watch how it falls. What you want to see is that it doesn't hang up and it doesn't rocket to the ground. You want a nice even drop, nice even pace. Say a count of 1 to 2,000 before, from the horizontal position before it hits the ground. 1,000, boom. Okay. Now, if it races to the ground, your spool tension is too loose. Okay. Spool the lure back up to new position. Go through the same process, and your spool tension was too loose. Crank this up a little bit, meaning turn it clockwise. That's your spool tension. Okay. Try it again. Maybe it's going nice even pace. You're set. Okay? Maybe it's hanging up. If it's hanging up, bring it up again and reduce the spool tension by turning it counterclockwise. Okay? What I'm doing now is leaving your spool tension in position to be sort of nice and neutral. There. See how with one turn of the spool right now, see how nicely that just keeps going and going and going and going. Okay, so forget what I said about your grease earlier. Somebody has fine-tuned this reel. It is in optimum condition. It's the way it was when it left the factory back in 1974, probably. Okay, so your free spool is in lovely position now. Will needs a little adjustment when you put a lure on there. Okay, that being said and done, the next function you're going to need to worry about when you're actually fishing is your drag setting. I have done all of this with the drag knob, this is called the star drag, fully and counterclockwise. It's locked in a fully counterclockwise position. Drag completely off. Okay? You add drag by turning the star knob with your finger, or any way you want, but that's the way the star drag clockwise. So that this is zero drag, which is the way it should be left when the reel is in storage. This is maximum drag, which it would be when you're fighting the biggest fish of your life. Okay? So most fishing is going to go on somewhere between those. So this is your heavy duty drag setting, if you will, and this is your fine tune. Okay? But really that spool tension, that adjusts tension on the spool, how free it will spool. And this adds pressure to the side of the shaft. In other words, adding drag during a fish fight. Don't need to know all that actually. Okay? So free spool on this one is forward, so that's engaged. To begin your cast, you've set up the rod, the spool tension set, your lure is a foot or so below the tip of the line, you're ready to cast or jig. Take your drag from the minimum position, just add a little bit. You're always going to need a little bit of drag. If you just want to jig off the side of the boat, do like you did to adjust the tension, finger on top of the spool, top of the line, your thumb, is actually controlling the line. Free spool, put the rod tip over the side of the kayak a little bit. Boom, okay, and let it drop down to the bottom. Okay? You'll know it's at the bottom when the line stops running out and you get a little bow in the line. Engage the reel, crank it up a couple turns, commence your jigging. Off you go. Suppose you get a fish on. Great. Strike. And the best way to know you got a fish on any time, whether you're tending the rod or not, is to have the clicker on. As soon as the fish strikes, that's an indicator. But it's always recommended by every rod manufacturer, the moment you start fighting a fish, take the clicker off. Not only is it annoying, but you wear down the parts a lot less. You can fight with a clicker on. It's a sign of an amateur, fighting fish with a clicker on. Okay? Good for you. You got some kind of fish on. You're going to fight him. Okay? The preferred means, you probably know this, is raise your rod about 45 degrees, crank back down to the horizontal, etc., etc. Suppose he starts dogging you and fighting you, and you're either hearing the clicker or noticing the line is pulling out even though you're turning like this. Increased drag. You're fighting the fish with too little drag. You'll have to readjust the drag during every fight to the tenacity of your fish, to the level of your fish. Okay? So, 3-pound dogfish, there. Okay, let's get rid of dogfish. Boom! 30-pound salmon, you're probably going to have to go maximum and really work it for half an hour or so. Okay? What else can I tell you? When you're finished, whatever it is, the fight you're on, okay, or you change your lure, start from the process from the beginning and reset it. Okay? I think that's about all I can tell you about
Maintenance.
this. Maintenance. Come and see me. I'll give you a business card.
Okay. I mean,
well-
obviously I should be rinsing it
Oh,
well
sorry.
after.
Always rinse
Yeah.
after every use. Give it a good rinse. Actually, yeah, it's a good point.